All right. Thank you, Trent. And gosh, I'm seeing so many
Oh
friends
yeah,
in here.
yeah, exactly.
It's awesome. Armand and Dave Woolley, and I see John Stahl
Exactly.
and Dan up uh, in Nebraska. Gosh, how fun. So
Hmm.
yeah. Um, not to leave people out, right? But
That's awesome.
so I say only about half in jest. If I haven't been to your state, I probably will be soon. I think Armand, I'm going to be out in your neck of the woods there. We're working on that, and I'll be at the Western Regional Conference on coming up in LSAW. I'm just thinking out west, but I've been all over. I just did one online this morning. I've probably done 20 programs on these already. So it's good that there's a lot of interest.
Hmm.
So what I'm going to jump in. What I'm going to do is you see if I can do this smoothly.
Hmm.
I am going to share uh, the red line version of the standards. These are they're available on the NSPS website now, in addition to the clean version of the 26 standards. They are currently residing under the 2021 tab. Trish, I think, told me, or Tim told me, they're going to create a 2026 tab and make that live on February 23rd. We also have about a 15-page FAQ document that will also be up there. So the resources will be there. And of course, you can always get a hold of me if you're not sure about something. I'll put some contact information up at the end. What I thought I'd take our brief time this evening, or this evening for me, late this afternoon for a lot of you, uh, and go over, just kind of breeze over the changes, focus on a couple of the more significant ones. When I do the programs, I've done them everywhere from an hour and a half, which is pushing it a little bit considering I like to spend probably about 45 minutes or so on this item right here. And I have a little PowerPoint that we do that on. Otherwise, it takes a good hour to get through everything if I spend the time that we should be spending. Um, uh, I've done everything. I did an 8-hour one also, and in the longer programs, the longer the program, the more time we're going to spend getting into really everything. So what we've got up here is the 2021 standards, and we've got red crossouts for what was deleted, and we have blue underlines for what was added. I might give you a very quick overview. Brent Trent said, I'm trying to get out of things, and I did relinquish chairmanship of the joint work group. The standards are the responsibility of a joint work group between ALTA and NSPS. There's about 10 title attorneys and about 10 surveyors on that group, and if you're intimately involved in NSPS or certainly involved at your state level, you would absolutely recognize a number of the surveyors on the work group. We met twice a year for the last 5 years, sometimes virtually, sometimes in person. Worked through all the suggestions. I think it's important. I've said in the past that we get a suggestion, it gets put on the list. It doesn't matter if Todd or I, or we have a great staff person at Alta who helps us, named Stephen Gold. It doesn't matter if we think it's a good suggestion, a bad suggestion, or if we're ambivalent about it. It gets on the list, and the work group will look at it. So we already have a list going for 2031. That's kind of the way things work in this world. It's hard to believe, but yeah, there's already maybe 5 things on that list. But the work group, we had what we thought was a final version almost a year ago, or in the spring. I took it to the NSPS. NSPS has a subcommittee that kind of monitors the standards and isn't responsible for them, but provides really invaluable input. I took that draft to them in Silver Spring last spring. They had some concerns over one of the items. We addressed those concerns for what we thought was the most part. Several of the people who had concerns indicated they were fine with what we did, but there was a kind of a trend, I guess, or something was developing in SPS that had an issue with one of the items, and so we ended up changing that, and I'll talk about that at the end here. In the end, though, we got it done. ALTA board passed it, NSPS board passed it, and here we are. So effective date February 23rd. I'll talk about that in a minute. Just going down through, I want to point out a couple things here. You'll notice that probably this whole first section on purpose, all the way down to about here, if you went back and looked at the first set of standards in 1962, it probably reads almost verbatim what this says. That's because the reason for these standards hasn't changed. And the reason we have standards is because lenders and buyers or owners typically do not want their title policy to have the general exception for matters of survey. And that's just kind of a blanket exception that anything that would have shown up basically on a land title survey that's not in the public records, they're going to they have an exception for that, right? Because we all know that there's a ton of stuff when we go out in the field, especially on kind of a complicated, busy site. We may identify all kinds of things, and so they have this blanket exception. If they get a land title survey, they will remove that blanket exception. They delete it, and then they study the survey and they identify the potential title problems that appear on the survey, and they write special exceptions for each of those. For example, they may say, our survey may show the neighbor's fence 3 feet over the line on the east, and they'll write an exception for that because that's a potential claim against the title. We show a 10-foot overlap with the southerly adjoiner. They'll write an exception for that. We show a row of utility poles cutting across the property and there's no easement. They will write an exception for that because these are all potential claims against the title of the property. And it's not like they're doing this behind closed doors. It gets put right in the commitment. The lender can see what those issues are. The buyer can see, or the owner if it's a refinance. So everybody's kind of put on notice as to what has been identified as the potential issues regarding title with this property. Okay, so anyway, that's why we've got these standards. And I know if I see that my camera is flashing a little bit for some reason. If it gets distracting, just let me know. I can turn my camera off. So this part here, we added a few versions ago, and there's a reason that we added it, which I'm not going to go into. It shouldn't need to be there, but it is. It's a reminder that if you're going to do a land title survey, if you're going to call this a land title survey, you have to meet the requirements. Okay? So I want to point out here that we struck the phrase on-site field work. And I'll explain that here in a short time. On the request for survey, we thought it would be appropriate to indicate when there is a request that it, in fact, as of February 23rd, will be for a 2026 land title survey. Nothing else there. This item I usually spend some time on, but I think the point of this item that I have in blue here, 2 sentences, is that we're usually doing a land title survey of a vacant property that's going to be developed, or it's a restaurant, or it's a hotel, or it's an office building. But sometimes we get involved with properties that just don't fit the mold. And a good example of this would be solar or wind farms. If they didn't have all of their very detailed requirements, if they just said, we want a land title survey, boy, there's a whole boatload of questions. And so the point here is if you look at the property that's involved and say, boy, this is just not the typical property, then we need to engage with the interested parties, which would be the lender, the title company, and the owner or buyer, depending on if it's a refinance or a sale, and discuss, right? Because we don't want people to be surprised at what they see on our survey when they get it, right? So let's make sure we have the questions answered ahead of time. Effective date in the FAQs, which are available out there, or you can send me a note right now and I can get them to you. I don't think the new ones are on the NSPS website yet. We talk about the effective date. It's pretty straightforward. If it's after February 23rd and you're starting a survey, that has to be to the 26 standards. If you're starting a survey before February 23rd and you're going to get done before February 23rd, well, that's a pretty easy one also. If you're starting before February 23rd and not going to finish until after February 23rd, I think you could probably use either standard because technically the new ones aren't in effect until February 23rd. My advice is, though, I would check with the client, with the lender or title company, because what we don't want to have happen is we do the survey to the 21 standards, they get it, and then a couple of weeks later they call and say, hey, you didn't tell us there's new standards, right? So let them maybe be the ones to make the choice if you aren't inclined to take the leap ahead of time. The place it gets a little more difficult on effective date is on quote unquote updates. And those of you who know me know I hate that term. There is no such thing. But if it's the way I look at it is if it's an update on a survey that you finished before February 23rd, that the closing got delayed on that transaction and it got delayed 6 weeks, they want you to go, quote unquote, update it. It seems appropriate and logical to me that that could be done to the 21 standards. But be careful because sometimes they will imply to you that it's an update, but they'll also tell you it's no longer Wells Fargo, it's now Citigroup, and it's no longer First American Title, it's Old Republic, and it's no longer the ABC Corporation, it's now the PDQ Corporation, which means they did close and now they're flipping the property. Yeah, in that case, no, it's a 26. I'm going to not address all that stuff. Under the measurement standards, there are no changes up there. I do spend some time on it if we had more time, but we did address some changes to relative positional precision. It looks like we changed this whole thing. We actually didn't. There were just so many incremental little changes here. We decided it would be easier on the eye to just strike this whole thing and put the new paragraph in. The reality, however, is that this part right here did not change. So almost half of that paragraph did not change. And here it is down here. What did change is we reworded it. We broke it into a little more bite-sized pieces and said that RPP is the accepted indicator of measurement quality on a land title survey. And then we changed the definition and actually simplified the definition. And we were able to do this without compromising the quality of our measurements. We had guidance on all of this from two different experts well, I guess I would say experts on measurement uncertainty. We redefined it as the air ellipse of the line connecting the adjacent monuments on the boundary. Previously, it was the air ellipse of the kind of the relationship between 2 points. That is a two-dimensional uncertainty, and the air ellipse of the line is a one-dimensional uncertainty. So it's actually simplified, and then we simply reworded this last part here, and said RPP is most commonly estimated by the results of a correctly weighted least squares adjustment. Trent, if you see questions come in, and I see the chat, but if there's something that needs to be a question for me, please just jump in, let me know.
Yeah, so far so good. I loaded the FAQs are on the ALTA's website, so I loaded those in the chat, and then
Perfect.
the link to the NSPS links, and then also the red lines and the finals are all in the
Okay,
chat
perfect.
somewhere. But yeah,
Perfect. Yeah, I knew the FAQs are on the ALTA website. I don't think they're on NSPS yet.
correct.
This is just a clarification. We made this change a number of places in the standards where we changed reference to adjoiners. We're not really what we found out in an interesting turn of events was that in the title world, the adjoiner is the person who owns the property next door. We are concerned with the property, not the person. And so we changed any reference to adjoiners, we changed to adjoining properties. Down in records research, we put some clarifying things in here. This used to be will, it is now must because we had used must down here. Uh, we wrote a clarification in here, and we thought it was important to clarify that there's a reason we're doing a land title survey, and that's because the title company needs the information that we're producing. And so we thought we should preface A here with, given the purpose of a land title survey, right, to provide information to the title company, we need title work. 99.5% of the time, it's the most recent title commitment. But if a title commitment's not available, it could be something else, whatever else is appropriate and is satisfactory to the title company is fine. We went on and we added a new part that says if a recent title commitment, however, is not provided, in some cases, additional title research may be required on the part of and by the title company or on the part of the surveyor. There are at least 3 states in the United States where surveyors are responsible for doing their own deed with their own easement research, even if they have a title commitment. That's an outlier, those states, but that is in fact the case. The idea, though, is that again, 99.5% of the time, we're going to have a current title commitment. The thing I want to say about this, though, is if somebody says, well, I've got all I have is this policy from 10 years ago, or all I have is this commitment that's 3 years old, that's perfectly fine. You can use whatever's the most recent information that's given you. If there is a lender involved, if there is a transaction pending, just keep in mind you will be reviewing new title work before it's all over with. We struck the requirement that the adjoining descriptions be provided to us, the descriptions for the adjoining properties. That doesn't happen in urban and suburban areas. It might happen in rural areas. The fact is that under the survey standards that every state has, except the states that don't, like California and Pennsylvania, New York, Minnesota, states that do not have mandatory survey standards, there is a standard of care. In addition to the fact that these standards require reporting the difference or the relationship from the surveyed property to the adjoiner. If that information isn't provided, I got to get it anyway, right? So if I can convince somebody else to provide me those deeds, good for me. But if they don't, I got to get them anyway. So that was stricken. You'll see reference to appurtenant easements. We thought it might be helpful and instructive to point out that an easement that benefits a property, what we're talking about is an easement that is appurtenant to that property. In the title world, this would normally be an easement that's insured. It would be listed in Schedule A of the title commitment. The last thing we did under the deed research is we clarified something and we said, except however, if the documents outlined in B and C are not provided, right? Notice that A is not listed there, right? So the implication is no, you have to have title work, right? You have to have title work. Otherwise, you could do a survey to this set of standards, but you could not call it a land title survey and you could not use the ALTA NSPS certification. The other thing we did is we just gave some examples of what we're talking about, non-public or quasi-public documents, right? Highway plans typically are not recorded, but they reside in a public office. We may need them to do the survey. Those are quasi-public. Railroads are, unless it happens to be an Amtrak-owned track, railroads are privately owned. Amtrak is probably quasi-public. but we need some of this information. And so the point of this is that there's nothing anywhere that says if we aren't given all, or if we aren't given, or if we don't have all of the appropriate information, we get to do a bad survey, right?
Right.
Uh, if we don't have the information that we need, we have to get it, right? There's no other way around that, and that's all we're saying there.
Hey,
This,
Gary, one
yes,
second. Going back just probably a minute or two, 90 seconds or
sure.
so. There's Christy and Aaron asked both which three states as part of the conversation.
Massachusetts, Maine, and Connecticut.
Okay.
There may be a couple others in New England. I'm not positive about that. I know that Maine and Massachusetts and Connecticut do. Uh, and Maine maybe because it came out of Massachusetts, right?
Sure. Okay. Perfect. Thanks, sir.
Yeah. So field work. This harks back to what I said, where we said I struck the on-site requirement. So ever since day one, the standards have said the survey must be performed on the ground. Right? Well, that's old news. In today's technology, I'm not even sure exactly what that means. And not only that, people are using drones and they're using laser scanning and they're using LiDAR. And so the work group felt like these standards should not be dictating what technology and what processes and procedures are appropriate on a land title survey. We thought that that should lie with the profession itself. So we said the fieldwork must be performed using practices generally recognized as acceptable by the surveying profession for purposes of a land title survey. This item here, we added relationship to surface of the ground. This is about providing better footsteps, right? If I'm doing an original survey, I want to provide footsteps for the person coming after me. Hence, we had location, size, character, type of monuments. Now we have relationship to surface of the ground. Somebody told me this is required in California. I know it's required in Indiana. I know it's required in North Carolina. We felt that it provides better footsteps for the future if we give this information. We're in the field here. This item was the only place left in the field requirements where the burden on the surveyor was not this observed in the process of conducting the field work. There was a reason that was still visible, which is a higher requirement. This time around, we decided to make that requirement the same as every other field requirement. Evidence of physical access observed in the process of conducting the field work. We also clarified that this is item 3 really is talking about vehicular access. Item 4 mentions vehicular, but it really is talking about other forms of access. Access is a really important thing to the title companies. This item, this is new here. What we found out was that some people thought that you did not have to worry about evidence of possession or occupation if it was more than 5 feet from the boundary. That is patently not true. We have to know where, locate, observe where the evidence of possession or occupation is, regardless of where it is. I did a survey one time. The fence was 165 feet from the written title line. Curtis Brown wrote about that. Casey testified in where the fence was 230 feet from the written title line. So we have to be cognizant of that, and we can't assign a number to that, right? We can't say, oh, it's 50 feet, because then if it's 51, it doesn't matter. It's just regardless of proximity. We need to be attentive to that item. Still in the field on 5E, we thought it would be helpful to just spell out what each of these items is addressing. Right? Item 1, this is evidence of easements that are listed in the Schedule B2. Right? For the access easement, we need to show the driveway. If it's electric line easement, we need to show the poles. Item 2 is evidence of use by other than the occupants of the property when there is no documented written document that provides for that use. So these would mostly be potential prescriptive easements. I know we just say parenthetically, that's what we're talking about. Um, Item 3, we want to be attentive to things that might be underground. Item 4 is utilities. We couple versions back, we decided that we should always be locating all utility features on the property because some problems had occurred where people thought, oh, I don't need to show utilities. They didn't ask for Table A, Item 11, which was true, but it turned out that utility feature was actually evidence of an easement for which, I'm sorry, evidence of an easement that was not documented, right? And so then there's a problem, right? So we decided to help surveyors not have problems by just saying, you know what, locate all the utilities on the property. And then we need to clarify because we messed this up a little bit last time. It's all utilities on the property or within 5 feet of the property, except utility poles, which are on the property and within 10 feet. And that's because it's not a very big cross arm that extends more than 5 feet from the pole. So we clarified that. That was really the intent all along, but we clarified that. All right, platter map. We have now we're preparing the platter map. We added similar wording to what we did in section 5. Must be prepared using practices generally recognized as acceptable by the surveying profession. I had been telling this and not trying to scare surveyors. I was saying, in 10 years, we are going to take our field notes, our digital files, our photographs, our records. We're going to dump them into, an AI program, and it's going to draw our plat for us. And I say, well, Autodesk ought to be thinking about this. I said that in one of the states that I was in 2 weeks ago, I guess. And somebody came up to me in the break and they said, I heard you say 10 years. And he looked at me and he said, there are people working on this right now. And he said, I'm telling you, it's probably more like 10 months.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be something, Trent, you guys have talked about, but I knew 10 years was way too long, but I
Right.
didn't want to scare people by saying it was coming sooner than that. But this guy told me, oh, it's coming and it's coming fast.
Yeah, I was gonna say Deed Reader Pro, those kind of things, right? Like there's stuff out there kind of already. So
Yeah, and it's crazy what's going on.
hmm
Okay, joining properties pursuant to section 4 was redundant. We didn't need that. Here's a pertinent to again, clarifying that. This is just a little rephrase. This is the section that talks about the items in Schedule B2, the survey-related items in Section B or in Schedule B2 of the title commitment. Generally, the easements, maybe the covenants and restrictions, and how we address those. Right? We list those, right, and we tell them. Something about them. We showed them. We can't figure out where it is. There's no evidence of it. Whatever. We just rephrase the ending of that sentence. Down here, we cleared up a little conflict we had. In one part of the standards, we talked about looking at tax records for adjoiners. Here we had said public records. Public records is way too broad, and so we turned it and we said tax records. That's what we do. We go to the GIS. That's how we figure out who owns the property next door. And then I had all of this adjoining properties. The change down here under 6C Romanes 8 was simply something I recognized very early after 2021. This is the place where we become aware of an easement that's not listed in Schedule B2 of the commitment. Maybe we stumbled across it. Maybe it used to be there and now it's gone. And so we're wondering what happened. And the requirement says, we asked the title company. So, hey, we found this easement. What do you know about it? And unless they can give us documentation that that easement no longer exists, then we have to show or at least explain its existence. What we had done last time inadvertently was we said, oh, unless they can show that it has been released. Well, easements can be extinguished or terminated a whole lot of other ways besides release. It could be vacated. It could be an official abandonment. And so we just reworded that to say, unless the title company can provide evidence that that easement has been terminated or extinguished. Lenders do not like this. They do not want easements showing up on the survey that are not listed in the title commitment, but we have potential liability if we are aware of an easement that exists and we're not showing it. Right? It does allow us to show it or at least explain it. So there's there's some negotiating there that could be done. This is a new item. This is under 6D, I think, presentation. Field crews, it's not probably that unusual, especially if we're in an area where there maybe are some people around. Somebody comes out and says, hey, that fence isn't on the line, or hey, are you looking for that pipe? Well, the guy across the street, tore it out or moved it, or you're looking for that stone. I've got it in my garage, or whatever they say, right? One of the exceptions in the general survey exceptions is boundary line disputes. And so if somebody says something to a field crew, this is going to require a little bit of training. If they say something to a field crew about potential title, my deed, they say my deed overlaps with his deed, or whatever they say, try and get them to write it down and sign it, and the crew can initial it or witness it. They probably aren't going to want to do that. Would you speak into my phone? They're probably not going to want to do that either. So it may be that the field crew just has to document what they said, and if they can figure out who it was, to document that. And then we put a note on the survey about these statements because this is absolutely relevant to a title company. This item, that's just a little bit of cleanup there. We kind of bifurcated item 7. So now we have 7A, which is the required certification. There are some states that require specific wording in a certification. Indiana is one. I think Tennessee is one. Somewhere where I was recently, it was another one. We just add another paragraph to it. And that's allowable. It says must bear only the following unaltered certification, except as may be required pursuant to 3B. And 3B says, hey, there's states that have laws, right? So we got to follow the law. The item we added is this. This is a very common question I get. The lender wants me to certify to successors and assigns. I'm not an attorney. There are a bunch of attorneys on the title side. In the FAQs, we tell you to talk to your attorney, talk to your errors and omissions, your professional liability carrier if you want to. But it is our belief that certifying to successors and assigns of the lender is not an issue. That does not increase our liability. And in our short time here, I'm not going to take the time to explain why that is, but it's a pretty straightforward explanation. They can't pay me enough to certify to successors and assigns of the owner or the buyer. The title company does not need successors and assigns. ALTA has told us that, which means you probably could do it. There's no harm in it. The people who want it is the lender. And there's a very specific reason they want it. And we do not believe that it increases liability, but we tell everybody, make your own decision on that. So we just added that certification may be extended to successors and assigns of the lender if that's requested.
Yeah, that's a big one, Gary. Thank you. I know you
I'm
didn't.
sorry?
I said that's a big one. You only did a couple seconds on that, but that's, like you said, that's always a question that comes.
Yeah, it comes up a lot. And usually it's kind of funny because the lender usually wants us to certify to all of the parties' successors and assigns.
Right.
Which is kind of a funny request because they're only worried about themselves. And that's not a criticism. They're worried about their situation. I don't know why they want successors and assigns of the other parties, but that's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
In the FAQs, we put more explanation on this item.
Yep.
The table A. So in the last number of years, we have been in the business of getting rid of table A items. And I see George has his hand up. George, you got a question?
Yeah, go for it. He's got, yep, there you
Yes, I do.
go.
Is my understanding correct that our liability when assuring to the certifying to the lender expires when the lender's note is satisfied? I mean,
That's correct.
we're off the hook then.
Yes, that's correct. We're liable, notwithstanding, a statute of limitation or statute of repose could
Right.
even cut it off before the term of the loan. But we are only liable to that lender as long as the loan is in place and still open. Once it's paid off, we're off the hook from them.
Good to know.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks, George.
Yeah, it is good to know. So in the last few versions, we've been in the business of getting rid of table A items. This time we did add one. So now the fill in the blank is item 21. It's not item 20. So we now have 20 spelled out items. We did just a little rewording in this first sentence. The main thing I want to say there is that the wording of these items is negotiable, right? It's negotiable whether you do it. The fee is negotiable, but the exact wording of the item is also negotiable. If you do change the wording, though, you need to put a note on the survey. Otherwise, you've certified that you did an item, but you actually didn't. You did a modified version of that item. This blue underline is a reminder both to surveyors and to clients that some items, and really the one that this would most often apply to is monumentation. Some items may be required by state statute, administrative rule, local ordinance, in which case we have to follow the law. So if you're doing a survey in, for example, Illinois or Indiana or any number of other states, and the client says, oh, I don't want to pay for monuments, the answer is, sorry, you have to. It's the law in our state. The reason it is optional is because of primarily of the states that have records of survey, and I'm looking mostly at you, California, that depending on where you're at and exactly what's going on, setting a monument can dramatically increase the cost of a survey, and that's why they're optional. I will tell you that the states that have to set I just had this question today. The states that have to set monuments just flat do not understand why this is optional. And I tell them, I explain the whole record of survey thing, and especially in California. Table A items, really not hardly anything changing through there until we get down to utilities. We did add markings coordinated by the surveyor or the client. And if somebody checks off 11B, we need to have a conversation because somebody needs to coordinate that. They need to make that order. The client needs to understand this, that in most parts of the country, an 811 locate request for a survey is an exercise in futility. And so we decided just to say, forget 811. You check this off. We will negotiate a private locate request. The client needs to understand there's going to be considerable expense, possibly a considerable expense and time associated with that. I think the important thing on item 11 is this paragraph right here. If I was doing a land title survey and I knew they were checking off one of these table A item 11s, I will put this right in the contract. This paragraph is all about managing expectations because unfortunately, and I saw this just when these new standards came out, I heard from someone, I don't remember who it was, and I do remember their association with surveying, but they were incensed that Table A Item 11 had not been changed to require that surveyors accurately locate all underground utilities. Right? The guy was pretty upset, felt that we were shirking our responsibilities. That is, with all due respect to him, and I don't know who it was, a moronic idea, right? Because we don't know where underground utilities are any more than anybody else. If they want to know where all the underground utilities are, they're going to have to excavate the whole site. Right? So I think this is a really important, instructive note. I put it in my contract. I would put it on the face of the survey also. Okay, item 14, the client is supposed to specify if they want the distance to the nearest intersecting street. They never do. So we just struck it. They can just check it off, and then it's up to us to decide what to do with that. Item 15, this is, I'll go down to here. We've reworded this and changed it really back to what it was intended in the first place when this was first written in. And you can read it there, but this is features on the property other than the boundary. We have to do the boundary survey on the ground, and location of features in close proximity to a boundary title or relevant setback line may be shown using imagery. Right? So we're not talking about creating line work using imagery. That would probably fall under the normal stuff that people do. We're talking about, rather than locating the buildings and locating all the utilities or doing whatever we're doing there, that we will just use imagery. Right? Now, obviously, we still have to do the boundary. We have to locate features close to the boundary, but that is an option. It's an option for perhaps the surveyor to suggest something. It's an option for the client to select it. It is not going to be appropriate in most cases. But in some cases, it might be appropriate. What do you have to do? First, you have to have a conversation with the client who's paying for this, and what are we going to use? What's available? Are there any licensing costs? That sort of thing. More importantly is be here. Right? We're doing this survey for the title company. The lender has to be happy. The title company has to be happy. Everybody has to be on board that we're going to do this. And if they are, then we're fine, right? But part of that conversation is we need to talk about, the accuracy, the precision of the instrument, the information. How complete is it going to be? Well, you're going to see the roof of the building, not the actual building. There's going to be shadows. You're not going to see some utility features and things like that. So we have that conversation. If they all say, no, that's good with us, then who am I to disagree with that, right? They're the ones using the survey. If all that comes to fruition, then we do need to have a note on the survey that explains where the stuff came from and all of that. So this is it's a change, but it's really a reverting back to what this was intended in the first place. The last one, this is the one that caused, I don't want to say caused a problem, caused a little consternation with the NSPS subcommittee and some people. We addressed those concerns. The work group thought this should be mandatory. And there's a couple reasons for that. I won't go into them. This was originally written as a mandatory item in section 6D under the presentation. And there were some folks in NSPS who did not like it being mandatory. They wanted it to be a table A item. And so when it came to the vote at NSPS in Minneapolis, my suggestion was if you all feel like you'd rather have this as an optional item, then approve the draft contingent on this being moved into table A. And the reason I did that was because if they just rejected it, that could have set the whole thing back for a couple months, and we'd have to change it. We'd have to go back to ALTA. We'd have to go back to NSPS. So that's what they did. They approved it contingent on this being moved. ALTA was already aware that that might be a concern. So when we went back to them, it was pretty easy to get them to approve that same thing. I do want to explain this. So what's happening is these bullet points are already things that we have to observe or do in the field on the survey, right? We already have to do these things. What this is doing up here is saying we already had to observe these things. We already had to locate them. We already had to show them on the survey. These are potential title problems, right? All we're asking is that we now put those in a table. There are two things that revolve or that probably resulted in this. One was that Todd and Trent mentioned Todd D'Amico, who is now chair of the work group. He deals with national clients all the time. He deals regularly with survey companies that provide survey services all across the country. That's what he does. He told me, I believe that he routinely deals with 19 companies that provide services nationwide, and 18 of them already voluntarily put one of these tables on. So it is a regular thing in the broader world. The other thing is that it used to be, when I got involved in surveying, there were a lot of title people who could look at a survey, they could understand it, we could call them, we could have a logical conversation about the survey and what it's showing and why it's showing things. Most of those people are gone. And the title industry will admit that. Right? And so now we're dealing with people who literally do not know, practically don't even know what a survey is or how to read it. We think that we should be providing benefit in this whole process. And one way we can do that, we can either say, well, you ought to train your people, here's the survey and dump it in their lap, or we can admit and understand that this is an issue and we can be part of helping them understand our survey by creating this table. We talked a long time about this, and the concern that I always had as chair, Todd has the same concern. In fact, ALTA has the same concern, believe it or not, is any of these requirements, anything in these standards that we do, we cannot be increasing the liability that the surveyor is under. And we think that we've accomplished that with this item. Some people think we did. I think the concern at NSPS was alleviated with two qualifiers. First off, we said the things we're going to list in this table, we are not giving a statement of legal opinion or an opinion as to ownership, right? I'm not going to tell you that that's an encroachment, right? An encroachment is a legal condition. The survey condition is the building's 3 feet over the line. Whether that condition is an illegal trespass, which is what an encroachment is not my call, right? And so that's the first thing we said. We are not making a call on this. We're telling you the building's 3 feet over the line. If you can decide if that's an issue. The other qualifier, we said that this table may not be a comprehensive list of all the concerns that are shown on a plat or map. In other words, I may look at it and say, okay, I see the building 3 feet over, and I see this and I see that, and I put those in the table, but it's an acknowledgement that they may see things that they are concerned about that I may not recognize as a concern. And so we've put them on notice. You still have to look at the survey. Right? So some people have said, oh, no, there's more liability because we're creating this table. Our opinion is the liability is if you don't observe and locate and show these features in the first place. And this is already required. We've like cherry picked this stuff out of the standards. And I want to point out there's nothing in this item that says you have to call something encroachment. You don't even have to call it a potential encroachment. I don't. I never use the word encroachment on a survey. I'll say the building's 3 feet over the line. We do have a thing in here about provide a means by which the condition can be readily located. I had somebody send me an example. They had a survey, they had a table. It had a little triangle with a 1, and it said fence extends 5 feet over the line. And you went and looked at the graphic part of the survey, and there was a little one over there, and it's right there where the fence extended 5 feet over the line. So that's providing a means by which somebody can identify where this issue is occurring. So that's a pretty big change, in my opinion. This item will get checked off, roughly 100% of the time. And so we all can decide, right? We didn't tell you what to call the table. Some people may want to call it table of potential encroachments, table of significant observations. One of the work group surveyors, I can't remember what term he used, but it was a term his company uses. And so, everybody can kind of decide, maybe you just call it a table.
Yeah, we use ours says area of concern.
Area of concern. Yeah,
Yeah,
perfect.
simple,
Perfect.
simple, yeah, simple there. So just there's a couple of things in the chat, and we'll get to that one really quick. But can you go back to where I know there was a few states that had the pushback at NSPS, and
Yeah.
they came from more states where the attorneys deal with land title transactions than surveyors and those kind of things, and that's kind of where the pushback came from, obviously. But can you elaborate just a little bit on that?
Yeah, actually, Trent, one of the concerns was from the West Coast.
No? Okay.
So it really wasn't from New England, for
Yeah,
example.
yeah,
In England, the attorneys are way more heavily involved in some states
yeah.
than they are in other states. So no, the concern was from some surveyors who, because number one, we did not have these qualifiers in there at the time,
Okay.
right? We didn't have that one, and we didn't have this one, and we also had named the table.
Got it.
Uh, and so we went back and said, let's not name the table. Let's put these qualifiers in. We left it in the mandatory part of the standards. The more vivid voices who had a problem with this, I talked to them in Minnesota before the vote, and they said, no, we're fine, right? And it was still in the main part of the standards. But there were some other people who really wanted this to be optional, and they kind of swayed I think the rest of the board, and so that's how it ended up in Table A. But yeah, it was from it was just, I think, an honest concern about liability.
Yep. Yep. That was definitely the case. And I do know that. And I know that was, one of the things we had mentioned is getting it as a table A, at least at that point, it's a negotiated item, right? So
Yeah, absolutely. That's an important point, because then
yeah,
it's negotiated, and you can,
yeah,
maybe you say, well, I don't, I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to do whatever,
mhm,
and it's all up for negotiation at that point. So
yep,
I don't think it's bad that it as a table A item. I think by the time 2031 rolls around, it may be so commonplace
yeah, yeah,
that that everybody's like, yeah, just put it in the main part. But for now, it's a table A item.
yep, got it. Mike had his hand up from
Yeah, Mike.
Alaska.
Yeah, sorry, I'm confused with this new reaction animation. And it's hard to raise my hands because they're both busted up. But anyway, I didn't mean to back you up there, Gary, but in talking about the imagery,
Oh yeah, that was good.
thinking
Yeah.
about the due diligence of the surveyor, because as we know, imagery can be, wide ranging from unrectified photography, Google Earth, wherever.
Their
But
map. Yeah,
I would think that the prudence surveyor would have to field check it, that make sure that he's got the datum shift figured out and so forth. I think it's a great value of things like parking lot stripes and landscaping and things. I mean, it lets people that aren't used to looking at survey documents, kind of recognize the site. But that would be my suggestion. If that if you're going to use imagery, you need to make sure it's on the basis of your survey, or you've done some field checking on it, maybe to FGDC standards or something less, and maybe have a notation that, I've used this imagery and it was, checked and to meet the relationship to the property lines of the survey control or something like that.
Yeah,
That's all.
I don't think that's a bad idea, Mike. And we've tried to capture that some of that here. by saying, well, I've got in Indiana, we have high resolution rectified orthophotography that I can get for free from the state. And yeah, should we check that? Yeah, in some cases, maybe. In the case that I always use as an example, I use imagery on an 1,100 acre chemical plant. The buildings were all out in the middle of the property. And the client said, we don't care. We don't care about any of the buildings. They're giving us the building plans. We know there's 88 buildings, and we just flat don't care.
Yeah,
And
yeah, and that's a perfect example. But you could also, have a 5-year-old imagery and something did happen that was close to the property
yeah,
lines or that needed to be examined further by survey.
absolutely. And that's why we have on here the ramifications, the discussion, accuracy, precision, completeness, and yeah, the surveyor, unless they're careful in the discussion or careful with the note, they could put themselves in a spot by not checking things and not recognizing that some things have changed since the photography. And so yeah, your suggestion is well taken. Yeah.
Love it. While you're there, if you want to just scroll up to 11B, Summer had chimed in and said she didn't see a red line on language about private utility locates, but honestly, the only difference between the 2021 and the 26 is that word or client.
That's correct. The
Otherwise, it's
21 still said private. It was in 21 that we changed this item. In 2016, it still talked about 811. In 2021, we changed it to private. If you are in a place that a 811 locate is actually fruitful, then you could negotiate with the client to cross out private and write in 811 and go forward with that. Then you'd have to have a note, obviously, to that regard, but that would be perfectly acceptable. And I see Mr. Woolley with his hand up. Hello, Dave.
Wait, I'm so sorry. Can I just touch on that? Because
Yes, please.
I really, yeah, whenever you guys added the note to the client, insurer, and lender, I remember that was, I guess, in 19. That really helped a lot. Because that wasn't there before. 811 here in Texas, or I mean, in where I am in Texas, they won't come out for survey,
Yeah,
period.
yeah.
Full stop. So that private utility became really important. But if a client marks 11B, then we still get into that conversation. You know what I mean? And so, about kind of who's paying for what or who's responsible for what, and so we've kind of worked that into the language, but that's where I had the question, because 811 is out of the question here.
yeah, and
Yeah.
you're not the only state, and which is why we in 2021 we just said, you know what, just forget 811. If it works for you, then make the change. But for the rest of us, it really doesn't work. So let's just forget it. But yeah,
Mm.
I think this note is one of the more important things that's available.
It's the
And
best thing that ever happened to me.
Yep.
yeah, I put it right on the survey.
Yeah,
So,
no, it's like the greatest thing ever. That, I mean,
good.
it made our lives so much easier. Thank you.
I'm glad to hear that. Dave, I saw your hand up.
If you could go up to page 1, and I just you did a fantastic job like always, going over this. But I would like to just touch on a couple things that I'm seeing. As you know, I deal with litigation matters in as it relates to this, and these ALTAs are like, from a litigation standpoint, the most awesome thing ever, except for the surveyor who did a faulty survey. Because if you go to the very top, you'll notice that these are minimum standard details. And
Yeah.
so it's always interesting when people always say this is the Cadillac of surveys. And I'm like, oh, no, actually, it's the minimum. And these standards are really well written. And if you go to the second paragraph, a lot of people are worried about table A, or they're worried about, these different things. Actually, be the third paragraph. Is if that first sentence says everything, and that's nothing to do with ALTA, did I get everything within 5 feet? Those words that means entitled to rely on is a really big deal. And
Yeah.
I just want to remind the surveyors here on the ALTAs that people just kind of bang these out. Nothing ever comes of them. There's a lot of poor quality out there, and you get away with it. And there's a complacency that happens. This is how we do it. And I just cannot stress enough how bad it goes. I'm involved in several cases now that are multi-million dollars. And the surveyor charged, if I remember correctly, $2,500, $3,500 for a survey. And there's, it's millions of dollars. And it's not even an exaggeration. It's a complete mess. And these words mean something, and I think that would be a good reminder that these are minimum, and that there's also a personal liability in addition to, because in this case, we had a surveyor, we had a surveying company, then we had a second surveyor. What you were saying, there's no such thing as an update, but did an update. So they named each individual surveyor, because one of them hasn't worked there for 5 years. They signed the first one. And so you don't even work there. 5 years later, you're named as an individual, which means you have to answer to that complaint because you signed it. And it comes down to just these sentences here. What does that mean?
Yeah.
So I don't want to get into your standards, but I just think go back to the real basics of what these say. And reasonable reliance is a term, and third-party liability is a term that if you're doing these kind of surveys, you should have a sense of them. Because I'm seeing bad things happen to people that just kind of go along. And then the last thing I'll say is I see notes on these ALTAs come through. They could be anything. One of the common ones is this survey should not be used for design or construction.
Mhm.
And they think that means something, but it actually means nothing, because a boundary survey is but a boundary survey is but a boundary survey. And you would rely on that survey in the context of any other survey.
Mhm.
And they don't negotiate those terms in the contract. So therefore, they're not an equal footing. Therefore, those notes mean nothing in my experience. Just to touch base, because it's such a good topic, and I'm seeing a lot of things. So what do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah, it is, David. Thank you. In my longer program, as I say, I spend 45 minutes to an hour talking about Section 1 and what you just talked about. There's too many people who think a land title survey is just a fancy boundary survey, right? It is way so much more than that. And if people don't understand the things that you just talked about and the things I talk about during that preface, then they're not doing themselves or their clients any help. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Dan threw a couple things in the chat. Dan, would you be willing to unmute and chat about both of those? Yeah, there you go. I love it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Are you talking about the relative error ellipse?
Yeah, the
Stuff, or-
relative error, and then you also threw in there about the Wisconsin court case. So I'm just curious a little bit more about that one too. So
Oh, well, yeah, the Wisconsin court case. This was mentioned at the WSL, our state institute in January, by a surveyor who gives us an annual update on issues. And maybe there's some Wisconsin folks there who heard it, but Reiner versus Karnofsky, somebody won adverse possession in kind of a, not really urban, but a suburban context with lots of like 150 feet square. And they won 28 and a half feet of land. And it was a little complicated, but the strongest evidence of adverse possession was basically the health of the lawn on one side versus on the other side, from fertilization and mowing and a flower garden. And that was, the court strongly talked about that. And you worry about that kind of thing. I mean, adverse possession laws change, and the common law kind of changes, maybe faster than it should. And just be on the lookout that, is someone going to expect that to be the standard of the kind of possession you show?
yeah, and Dan, that's a good segue to this idea of the normal standard of care, right? And a little about what Dave talked about too, that we have a set of standards here, but you also have a standard of care in your area. And if the standard of care in your area is tied to the fact that the courts have decided that mowing is enough to prove adverse possession, which it typically has not been, but now all of a sudden it is, well, then we need to think about that sort of thing. So, yeah, that's why I think it's really great when somebody is paying attention. We have somebody in Indiana who every quarter has an article in our state magazine about the court cases that have come through. So that's really good.
And I think that goes back. I memean,
And that,
Gary, on that same point, Dan, Gary talked many, many years ago about like a prescriptive easement of like foot traffic of somebody cutting through a corner of a dirt
Yeah.
lot for, you've used that example many, many times over the years, but it's a similar situation where they didn't pick up this, this dirt path that they've been traveling for 20 years to cut a corner, right? Like one of
Yeah.
those type of things. Yeah.
Yeah. And the title company was extremely concerned about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So sorry. And then Dan reached out to me last month about possibly doing a presentation on relative error. So we're gonna get him signed up.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. We had help with this. We had two experts in measurement theory who helped us with this. We didn't take everything that both of them said, but we did tweak it. And one of them actually teaches this in at state conferences. So yeah, if you put something together, Dan, I would love to see it.
Yep.
yeah, sure. And I'll just say quickly about the relative error ellipse. I mean, most of what I deal with is how the network adjustment applications actually scale the errors up. And I'm writing an article for American Surveyor about some of the differences in that. Right. But there's no app that takes a error ellipse and scales it by 1.96 to 95% confidence. They all scale that error ellipse at least by 2.45, and
Right.
some will go even higher based on the degrees of freedom. So you mentioned before, like saying that an error ellipse of a line is a one-dimensional thing, and that implies you scale to 95% by 1.96. There's no app that does that. So your error ellipses are still going to come out 2.45 times bigger than, kind of the standard error ellipse or the standard error rectangle from the coordinate standard errors. And I don't want to go down a rabbit hole with this because that's definitely not the most important aspect of the ALTA standard.
But yeah, but it's
Yeah,
important.
but that's good stuff, and that was one of the things that one of our experts checked was that the two-dimensional is the 2.45 you talked about, and they actually did they computed the full covariance matrix at the 2.45, and they computed the area ellipse of the line at 1.96 or 1.97, and in a typical survey scenario. And the difference was utterly insignificant, which was good news for us. But
Yeah,
and
you
then,
would think a lot of these are on, smaller, I don't want to say smaller lot surveys, but I mean that error difference is very minimal to some degree.
Yeah.
And I'll just say that it's frustrating that even if we agree on how much a 95% error ellipse theoretically should be scaled, different apps scale it differently. And different apps will show different things about relative position differently. And so I cover that in that there's an article coming up in the American Surveyor. And I don't really, in that article, it's more just to show the differences. It's not to say you need to do it this way. This is the right way. This is the wrong way. It's like, here's why you get 7 different answers from 7 different applications.
Sure. Yeah. It's an awareness that people need to have. Yeah. Good. Thanks.
And Dan and I had a private chat. So April 20th, he already agreed to it. So April 20th will be the presentation. So
Excellent.
I love that. Okay. And then George had his hand up real quick too. And then.
Okay, Gary, I've had the pleasure of attending many conferences where you've spoken about ALTA surveys, that I've learned a lot. And the one thing that I've taken away from your presentations, and unfortunately I've got to say I've done hundreds of ALTA surveys, which Probably is the cause for my gray hair. But the one thing I've taken away is I don't think there's anything we can do as surveyors that incurs more potential liability than doing an ALTA survey. I just can't think of much that we can do that we're not putting our butt on the line, really.
Yeah, it's
Validation
interesting.
certificate.
It's an interesting comment, and I know a lot of people just they don't want to do land title surveys because there's too much liability. The thing we have all strived for, and the thing, by the way, that we run by professional liability managers before we adopt a new set of standards to make sure we're not accidentally creating more liability on a surveyor than what we already have. And we got that input and we were fine. But the good thing about these standards is you can do everything in here that's required, and therefore you can certify that you did you did the survey pursuant to these standards, and that's why we work so hard to have them written very clearly so that it's as clear as possible what our responsibilities are. I, like Dave Woolley, I've been an expert in certainly, I don't know, not a huge number, but maybe half dozen cases revolving around non-title surveys. And inevitably, it's somebody who did something, they shortcut something, they didn't understand something, or they overlooked something, and they ultimately didn't follow what the standards said.
Well,
So,
I found it's definitely a team effort because we rely on the title company to a great extent. They rely on us to a great extent. And if we're both doing our jobs the way we're supposed to do our jobs as professionals, the client ends up with the product that they need, and we're all good to go. But like you say, there are some that kind of maybe don't take things as seriously as they should, and that's where the trouble starts.
yeah, I agree 100%. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and then John Stahl just threw in there, clear set of standards will reduce our liability. A simple boundary survey can imply any standard.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a very good point,
Heck
John.
yeah.
And
Yep.
professional liability managers will tell you a good set of written standards actually is a huge benefit to us,
Yeah.
especially if we
Mhm.
plug those into a written contract. And John, you and I have talked about that. So
Yep. Yep.
yeah, very, very good comment. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
But on a good boundary survey, if you're doing your job properly, you're going to list the sources of the information. For sure, a title report if you're doing your job.
Yep.
You're going to list the research you've done, and you're going to list and explain how you did what you did and what you used and why you used it. And if you do those things, you should be pretty safe.
Yeah,
Yep. Exactly.
agreed.
Well, that was great. I love it. Super informative. I know, it's still fairly quick, but obviously you're making the run this spring and fall, so everybody will
I
get
am.
to get to hear
Yeah.
you everywhere. Yep.
I am everywhere. Let me put, for those of you interested or want
There you go.
it, that QR code will give you all of my contact information. Email works best if you have a question, because I might be flying or presenting, but I will follow up with you relatively promptly, um, and try and get your question answered. So with
I will
that,
say Gary never leaves an email unanswered, and he is always super responsive and a huge asset for our profession. So I appreciate it as always, Gary.
my pleasure.
Yeah. Any last second questions? It's getting late for Gary, but I want to, or most of you on the East Coast, but anybody got any last second things? If not, amazing as always.
Thank you very much, Gary. See
Yeah,
you next
exactly.
month.
Yeah,
All
exactly.
right. Yeah. Look forward to seeing a bunch of you wherever I see you next.
Exactly, right? I love it. Thanks, Gary. I totally
Yes,
appreciate
thank
it.
you, Gary.
Everybody
Thanks,
take care.
Gary.
Thanks.
Yeah.
You as
Bye,
well.
everybody.
Thanks.
Have a great week.
A quick shout out to Christy Eshe. She is the president of CLSA on there, and it's good to see you, Christy. But she's
Yeah.
the state president this year, so
Exactly.
we're lucky to have her there. So
Thanks, Dave.
You
As of
betcha.
just a couple of days ago.
Saturday, yes.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. All right. Bye,
Take care.
everybody. Have a great week.